Good morning and welcome to Worldwide Wisdom. We're learning about the spirituality of trees because the Torah tells us today about the importance of keeping your trees, fruit-bearing trees, and not destroying them, not cutting them down. Why? For man is the tree of the field. The Torah compares a human being to a tree. How interesting, of all things to compare a human being to a tree. What's up with the tree? What's the message here? We'll be talking about this momentarily. But before that, Rob, you had a question about the what? About why the Torah prescribes death?
Yeah, as a lawyer, I'm interested in the portion of this week's Parsha that
There's a testimony.
About the testimony. And it says 2 or 3 witnesses. Since the Torah is not supposed to have anything that's redundant or unclear, why wouldn't it say on 2 or more witnesses? Because when it says 2 or 3, then is it 2 or is it 3?
Right. So
but yeah. More importantly is the standard. What if you have 2 witnesses that say he violated the law? We have 2 witnesses that say he didn't violate the law.
Very interesting.
There's no explanation. Where in American law, in a criminal case, it has to be beyond the shadow of a doubt, or in a civil case, by the preponderance of the evidence. So it seems very ambiguous here. Can you explain?
Wow. Okay. First of all, I just want to say that this topic is very much connected to what we're going to talk about, the spirituality of trees. Number one. Second of all, I just want to give you a direct answer to your question. The question is, why does it say at the very beginning of this week's Torah portion, you're talking about page 1163, where it says in the first aliyah, again, it's page 1163, verse number 6, that the idolater who is liable to death must be condemned to death by the court by virtue of the testimony of a minimum of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses. Well, remember, the Hebrew, the literal translation is in the boldface. So if we read the literal translation, it's like this. He is liable to be put to death by testimony of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses, may not be condemned to death by the testimony of 1 witness. That's the literal interpretation. Everything else here fills it in. So I just want to say this to you. This is why it's so important to understand why you have a written Torah and an oral Torah. The written Torah is cryptic, it's short, it's nuclear. The oral Torah expands and expounds upon the meaning of the written Torah. So here you've got 2 specific questions. The first question you ask is, why is there a seeming redundancy of when the Torah says if there's 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses, he'll be held accountable? The Torah could have just said if there's at least 2, or Torah could have just said 2, and you would have automatically, obviously known that if you have 3, you also have 2, right? So that would be an entirely unnecessary. It's an unnecessary redundancy. It's an unnecessary redundancy, right? That's the first question. The second question is, what happens when you have two testimonies of witnesses conflicting against each other? In American law, my understanding of what you said was that they will figure out who is the more credible testimony.
It has to be beyond the shadow of a doubt.
Okay. So I'll tell you this, that first of all, Rashi answers your first question. If you look in Rashi's commentary, which is not actually translated here, it says, if Rashi asks the question, if the testimony is fulfilled through 2 witnesses, then why do I need to say 3 witnesses? You and Rashi are on the same page. Well done, right? And says Rashi, the purpose is in order to compare the 3 to the 2. Just like the 2 is 1 testimony, when 2 witnesses come together, they form 1 unit. So 3 witnesses coming together form 1 unit, and therefore, what does that mean? What's the difference? That ties straight into your next question. What happens when you have conflicting testimonies? They're treated as units. What happens is, according to Torah, there's a principle called Eidim Zoimamin. Eidim Zoimamin means colluding witnesses. When 2 witnesses come in and they'll say, or 3 witnesses, and they come in and they say that so-and-so killed so-and-so. And a second set of witnesses now comes in, second unit, and they come in and they say, that couldn't possibly be true. Why? Because you were with us at the state, the time, and place elsewhere. So when you say that you witnessed the murder taking place in this day at this place, you were with us, Imanu Ayisem, somewhere else. So what happens then is, there's a whole tractate of Talmud called Makos, which means whips, which is dedicated to this exact topic, where the second testimony is believed over the first testimony, unless a third set of witnesses comes in and testifies that the second witnesses are colluding. It's a whole beautiful section of Torah. It's a whole section, beautiful section of Torah. But to answer your question, when does the first set of witnesses when are they determined to be colluding witnesses? Only when every one of them, the members of the unit, is found to have indeed not been there on that day. But if only 2 out of the 3 were found to not have been there on the day, then they're not classified as the conflicting, as colluding witnesses. In other words, they're treated, if they come as 2, or if they come as 3, or if they come as 100 witnesses, they're treated as one unit, and all of them need to be determined to not have been there on that day in order for them to be determined as colluding witnesses. So I hope that answers your question. All right? But Rashi really addressed both your questions. Very interesting how both of your questions were addressed in that single Rashi. Both of your seemingly unrelated questions were in fact deeply related. Okay? But let's... Yes, the scholars of the community. I love it. That's right. So there are other implications, but and they're treated as a unit. But the example that Rashi gives is the question that he gave.
This is a famous short poem about trees.
Oh, we got a poem about trees. A famous short poem about trees. Here goes. It's by Joyce Kilmer. I think that I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree. A tree whose hungry mouth is pressed against the earth's sweet flowing breast. A tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray. A tree that may in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair, upon whose bosom snow is lain, who intimately lives with rain. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. Love it. I never actually heard that one before. It's beautiful.
Joyce Kilmer was a man.
Oh.
He was a soldier in World War I.
Really? How interesting. Well, let's go straight into this. Let's understand what the Torah has to tell us about trees, because it relates to the siege on Gaza. That is what the Torah talks about. By the way, anybody who says that Israel is laying siege to Gaza is making a very, very big mistake, because you cannot lay siege to a piece of real estate that you're not entirely surrounding, right? Since Gaza has a border with Egypt, therefore, and Egypt has a far, far more stronger wall on Egypt's like an iron curtain. It's much, much bigger than the Israeli side of the wall. So just important to know that. Let's go. So let's see what it says here in the verse. It says as follows. We're on page 1179, verse number
1179.
1179. Yep. Verse number 19. Returning to the laws of besieging a city outside the promised land. If you besiege such a city, you must begin the siege more than 2 days before Shabbos, and repeat your offer of peace a few times during this period before you undertake to wage war against it to capture it. You must not destroy its fruit trees, by wielding an axe against them, for since you may eat from them, you must not cut them down. Is the tree of the field a man who is able to come into the besieged field, fleeing from you? Since it is not, you should not punish it. That's interesting. So the translation here reads the verse as a rhetorical question. Is the man the tree of the field, that he's your enemy that needs to be cut down? The way I read it is not in a rhetorical question, but as a statement. For man is the tree of the field to come into the besieged city, fleeing from you. So in other words, I read it as a statement that man is in fact the tree of the field. But the verse continues, however, you may be destroy and cut down any tree that you know is not a food tree, and use its wood to build a blockade against a city that wages war against you. Keep the city besieged until its submission. Now, this is a very, very important verse. When it says keep the city besieged until its submission, these are the laws of Torah warfare. You want to have God on your side when you fight a battle? Then you fight a battle until its submission. You don't fight a battle halfway. You don't fight a battle only in order to, you don't start a surgery only in order to go halfway through the surgery and say, okay, enough blood already. We're going to sew him back up. You know, imagine you do a heart transplant and you take out the heart and you're like, oh, there's too much blood. Forget it. We're not going to carry on. No, you start a job, you finish it, right? Sure. You don't start a war that you're not willing to finish. And that is what the anti-Semites of the world are trying to do to Israel today. They are trying to stop Israel not through a war of weapons, but through a war of narratives. And they're trying to say it's not nice to fight a battle. Any other nation that fights a battle. You heard Ukraine in Kiev this morning got hit with a rocket. You're Ukrainian, right? No, you're Russian. Sorry. Forgive me. You're on the wrong side of the battle here. I sent a video to my friend. I have a friend in Rostov, which is South Russia, near the border of Ukraine. I sent him a video of a drone coming into a building in Rostov and blowing it up. It happened like a few minutes earlier. So I sent it to him a few days ago. And he's like, "Oh my God, that's 2 streets down from my house." He's in Rostov. It was a Ukrainian drone. Anyways, so this morning, Kiev was attacked. A residential building was attacked in Kiev, and by a Russian drone, and it killed a couple people. At least one child was killed. You heard about the United Nations protest about this, right? Only Israel. You know, you have a terrorist dressed in a press journalist suit, right? And the whole world is up in arms. Here, a child was killed in her bed while she was sleeping in Kiev, and the world doesn't care because only when it comes to Israel's wars, Israel has to stop in the middle. Every other nation, they can finish their wars to the end. But here's the Torah lays down the foundation. You don't fight a war unless you're willing to finish it until submission. Remember, World War I was a disaster. There was no victory. It ended in a truce. And that's why World War II happened. Yep. World War II was the result of not pressing the Germans into submission. And therefore, they rose up again and to World War II. That's why the Allies insisted that in World War II, they needed to march their armies through the capitals of Germany in order to prove the submission. And they needed the Japanese to submit. Total unconditional surrender was the key word, right? To sign, right? On the ship, right? So that's not even the focus of what I want to talk about today. I want to focus today on this idea that man is compared to the tree of the field. So why is it that man is compared to the tree of the field? The reason is because a tree is unique to other creations, just like that beautiful poem that you mentioned, that it kisses God, right? It's constantly kissing God. You see, everything in this world relies on its source, on its life source for survival, right? We human beings need to have oxygen, right? Fish need to have water, right? We all come from the earth. But the difference is, we have 4 strata in creation. We have the human kingdom, the animal kingdom, the vegetable kingdom, and the inanimate kingdom. Only the vegetable kingdom, which is the flora, the trees, the plants, only everything the Torah says comes from the earth. It says so in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, King Solomon's Ecclesiastes, Kol hayom min ha'afar, everything originated from the earth. But when it comes to the trees, they're the only ones that are never separated from their life source. It's interesting, trees and fish. Fish can never separate from their life source from the water, and trees can never separate from their life source. You separate them from the ground, they die. Animals and humans are able to roam the earth, proximity to the earth, but they don't actually reveal their connection to the earth at any time. Only the tree is truly connected at all times, to the point that if you separate the tree from the ground, it's going to die. And it does so throughout all seasons, right? Through winter, summer, fall, and spring. And even throughout those seasons, it's able to produce the fruits, right? The etrog, which we're going to buy soon for the festival of Sukkot, is, how do we know what an etrog is? The Torah doesn't identify the etrog, the citron, as a specific fruit by name in Torah. How do we know what it is? Because it says in the Torah, Priyat Sadar, which means the fruit of the beautiful tree. But another way to read that same word in Hebrew is the fruit that lives on the tree all year long. From what I know, I'm not a botanist, but from what I understand, the citron is maybe the only fruit that lives through all 4 seasons: spring, summer, fall, and winter. Right? So the citron can live on the tree for multiple years, whereas other fruits, from what I understand, they only survive their season and they're done. Right? So such is the nature of the tree that it's able to not only survive the various seasons, but it actually thrives through the various seasons and continues to produce its fruits. And in this regard, man is compared to the tree. This is how Chassidus explains this beautiful concept. Why? Because man also is incapable of being separated from his life source. The human being is not just a physical body, which is a corpse. He's actually a spiritual life, a soul, which animates him with life. In fact, how you say soul in Latin is anima. Anima, like animation, which means life. The soul is life. And in order for this human being to be to be alive, he's got to remain connected always to his life source. So what then is the life source of a human being? Exactly right, Arnie. Kiheim chayenu. It says this in the verse. Is it in this week's Torah portion or next week's Torah portion? Coming up in chapter 30. No, it's Parshas Nitzavim. In Parshas Nitzavim it says, Kihu chayecha ve'erech yamecha, for it is your life and the length of your days, a reference to Torah. Torah is Kiheim chayenu. Torah is our life. And it is from Torah that a Jew is able to draw his life source. Remember, God and his Torah are one. And since we come from God, therefore, we are deeply connected to Torah, right? Where does a child come from? The Zohar tells us that we are the children of God, right? We are the children of Hashem. B'ni b'chari Yisrael, my son, my firstborn Israel. So where does a child come from? Which part of the parent? Comes from the parent's brain. This is what it says in the Kabbalah. Now, it's interesting to understand this idea. I don't know if modern science has caught up to identify this particular topic, this specific detail. But if you think about it, the child must be sourced in the highest faculties of the parent. Because if the child is originated only in the lowest faculties of the parent, maybe in the dance moves. Well, let's say dance moves are less advanced than intellectual prowess, right? So if a child was sourced in the lowest faculties of the parents, then the child will be able to maybe dance like the father, but not be able to think like the father, right? But when it comes to, we see children, they don't only resemble the parent, they actually think like the parent. And it's beautiful to see how children resemble their parents' behaviors. So it's because the child is sourced in the parents' highest faculties, which is the brain. Now, if Torah is God's wisdom, God's brain, so to speak, that means that when we Jews are sourced in God's brain, we're sourced in God's Torah. As long as we're connected to Torah, we're doing great. We're alive. We're like the tree that's pumping. What does a tree pump? Sap and enzymes and nutrients, right? But if you're going to separate yourself from Torah, what are you going to be left with? Just a stump. Just a trunk. It's a beautiful story of an ancestor of mine. I once went to a Torah ceremony that was donated by Eli Wiesel, blessed memory. Eli Wiesel was a famous Holocaust survivor. He was dedicating a Torah in Ramot in Israel. I must have been about 15 years old. And there we were. He invited all the members of his extended family to this particular Torah dedication ceremony. I don't remember all the details, but I do remember that as extended members of his family, we were given a family tree. And in this family tree, they showed how that branch of the family goes all the way back to King David. I still have the family tree at home. But I'm looking at the family tree, and I see one of my apparent ancestors. They were asking people, so are you from this aunt, this uncle, this grandfather, this great uncle? And they were handing out different family trees, so people would be able to know, their ancestry. So what happened was that I'm looking at the family tree and I see that apparently one of my ancestors, his name was Rabbi Elchanan HaEpiphyor, Rabbi Elchanan the Pope. So I looked at my dad. I'm like, is it just me or is this a little weird? Rabbi Elchanan the Pope? I mean,
That's strange.
That's a little odd. What happened here? So we looked up the story. The story goes, I don't remember exactly when it happened, but that there was a great rabbi by the name of Rabbi Lazar Hagadol, Rabbi Lazar the Great. He was a brilliant Talmudic scholar. And his wife tragically died young. His wife died young, and she left him with two twin boys. Now, in order to care for the boys, he hired a nanny, a non-Jewish nanny, to take care of the boys. Problem was that one day when the rabbi was away studying Torah, teaching Torah, doing whatever he was doing, he would have taken the boys with him, but one of them was sick. So the sick one, Elchanan, was sick. He left him behind with a nanny, and by the time he came back, she was gone and the boy had disappeared. Now the rabbi was a brilliant man. He was a logician. You ever heard of that? Logician?
Yeah.
He was a logician. So he understood what happened over here, living in the culture of the Christian church that was influencing people to convert to Judaism, to Christianity, and telling Christians that they would save their souls if they would capture a Jewish child and bring him to the church. He understood that she must have taken him to the church. So he went knocking on all the churches and the monasteries nearby, give me back my boy, but of course he was turned away. And he had no choice, no power, no protection to protect himself to bring back his boy. Can you imagine a husband lost his wife and now he lost his boy to kidnapping? Terrible. Meanwhile, the boy was very sick. He was delirious. He wakes up weeks later and he doesn't really know where he is. He must have been young. He's 4 or 5 years old. So they tell him, this is your house and we're your parents. And he says to them, they say to him, you're a Christian now, and that's it. Of course, he couldn't put up a fight. And they raised him in the monastery. And there he grew up. He was a very, very, very smart boy. So he grows up to rise to the ranks. He becomes a young priest, and he becomes a priest. And then he becomes whatever the process is of them, maybe a cardinal, maybe a bishop, whatever the case is. Ultimately, the guy becomes the Pope. He becomes the Pope. He's a smart Jewish boy. He became the Pope. Now, in those days, the custom was when you become Pope, you had to create some sort of an anti-Semitic decree to inaugurate your new administration. So here he is, and he has to make some sort of an anti-Semitic decree. And the Jewish people sent a delegation to go out and see if they could appease him. So who's chosen to lead the delegation?
His father.
Rabbi Lazar Agadol, Rabbi Lazar the Great, the father. Unbeknownst, he's going to greet his own son. As he's brought into the Vatican with the other rabbis, the butler of the Pope introduces the delegation of rabbis, and he says to them, the senior member of the delegation his name is Rabbi Lazar. They call him the Great, and one of the reasons why they call him the Great is because he is so smart, and he never, in fact, lost a game of chess in his life. Really, says the Pope. I would love to play chess with him. So they bring out a chessboard, and the horror. Can you imagine who won the game of chess? Who do you think won the game of chess, Mark?
Tied. No one won.
So Mark thinks nobody won. Nope. Who do you think won? Arnie. The Pope won the game. Can you imagine? How humiliating for the rabbi. The first game of chess he lost in his life as the Pope. He got a formidable enemy over here.
His son.
He didn't know it's his son. But he did notice the thinking patterns. He did notice the patterns of thinking that were ingenious and eerily familiar. He was able to retro-engineer the plan. Normally the rabbi played chess. Nobody knows how to do these moves. Yet this guy was battling him as if he was fighting with his own brain. He was like, this is uncanny.
It's familiar.
It's way too familiar. So he started cross-examining the priest. Who are you? Where were you born? Which town were you born in? I don't know. Where were you raised? I was raised in a monastery. Really, he says to him. Who are your parents? I never met them. They told me my parents are the church. So he starts to sing to him a lullaby that he would sing to the boys after their mother passed away. Or maybe the lullaby that she sang to them. And what happens?
He recognizes.
He recognizes the tune, and father and son realize they finish the rest of the story. And he now tells his father, he says, Dad, what am I going to do? So the father says to him, listen, you're the Pope. So undo the decree and come join the Jewish community. Find a way. He faked his own death. If you look in the annals of history, I forget what his name was, Maximilius, maybe. He had some sort of a name, but he had a very short tenure as Pope. He mysteriously died, and he went back to the Jewish community. And from then on, he was quoted in Torah sources as Rabbi Elchanan Apifior, Rabbi Elchanan the Pope. That's how he's quoted in Torah sources when he comments on Torah, right? So why am I telling you this beautiful story? Is because the reason I'm telling you the story is because the father was able to recognize the thinking patterns of the son. Because we are the children of God and we come from God's brain, so to speak, right? And what that means on a practical level is that we come from Torah. When a Jew studies Torah, he's filled with life, he's filled with vitality, he's filled with energy, with survival against the odds. When the Jewish people are disconnected from Torah, what happens? They wither and die. Now we can begin to understand why it is that there's this passionate debate in Israel about whether the Torah students need to enlist in the army. And if you remember, a few days ago there was a big chat in the group in the show here, a big Farbrengen in one of the WhatsApp chats about the position. Somebody was very upset about the position of the shul with regards to the state of Israel. And I stood my guns and I said, listen, we're not apologizing for putting Torah values before nationalistic values, because as a Jew, our top priority as a shul, as a synagogue, as a group of Jewish people, our top priority, our allegiance is not to the national state of Israel. Our allegiance is to the God of Israel. And that is the secret to our survival. It's not the IDF, it's not the IAF, it's not the Mossad, it's not Bibi Netanyahu, it's not our APAC or FIDF or our allegiance with our esteemed seat in the United Nations that is the secret to our survival. What is the secret to our survival is Torah, right? And a Jew needs to remember that the national state of Israel is a gift from God, but don't bite the hand that feeds you. Torah is the secret to the Jewish people's survival. And therefore, you want to protect the state of Israel, you can do so. Very important. You have to go to the army. Very important. But if you're capable of studying Torah, by all means, go for it. You need to study Torah. And of course, even the soldiers need to study Torah. But then there's special units in the army. There's unique units. There are soldiers that are in infantry. There are soldiers that are in parachutes. There are soldiers that are in tanks. There are soldiers that are in intelligence. You know that there are soldiers that don't pick up a gun. You know why? Because all what they do every day is that they deal with computers. They don't need to deal with machine guns. They don't need to know how to drive a tank or how to jump out of an airplane, because their job is to watch a computer screen all day and to know exactly what Bashar Assad is doing today, or they need to know what the Ayatollah is eating for breakfast tomorrow morning. That's their job. It's not about shooting a machine gun. Another division of the Israeli army is those that study Torah. What?
Yeah, but they don't want to go in the army to do that. They just don't want to go.
I want to tell you, I was recently in Chicago. Went to visit my son. And my son, he told me before I went, he said, Tati in Yiddish, and his father says, Tati, you don't need to do this. But my friends asked, but you don't need to do this. But my friends asked if you would like to make a Farbrengen with my class, but you don't need to do this.
You have to do it.
I said, Shalom, I don't want to do this. Anyways, my wife heard about it and she forced me to do it. So we had a Farbrengen. And what did we talk about in the Farbrengen? I said, boys, I need you to understand. You're 15, 16 years old here in Yeshiva in Chicago. And you might settle into a state of complacency, thinking that I'm just going to roll with the punches over here and just sort of survive the year and survive until lunchtime, until dinner time, until summertime. No, I needed them to understand there's a war going on in Israel and it's on your shoulders. We are one collective corpus. We're one nation united. And you are a unit that cannot be sleeping on the job. If you're a yeshiva in Chicago, you need to make sure that you are providing spiritual cover to a soldier in Gaza, to a soldier in Lebanon, to a soldier in Syria, to an Air Force pilot in Iran, and to a Mossad agent in Pakistan. You are providing that cover because you are part and parcel of that army unit, and you need to make sure that you are working with alacrity and not verschlafen, asleep on the job. And the boys really were so taken. They were so taken aback. And I proved it to them from verses in Torah. And then I said to them, one of the boys is very upset with me. He's from Washington. He said to me, he says, Rabbi Vikler, how could you possibly say that my Torah study will make a difference? How could you possibly say that my Torah study will make a difference and impact to the war in Israel? What am I? I'm nothing. And the Torah is for thousands of years already, and hundreds or dozens of generations. So then I looked at him and I said, this is a real farbrengen. And I said to him, the Torah was written only for our generation. What are you talking about? I said, in the very first Rashi in the Torah, what does it say in the first Rashi in the Torah? It says, why do we have so many stories, so many narratives in the Torah? The stories of Adam and Eve and of Noah and the flood, and Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, and the 12 tribes, and Joseph, and the going down to Egypt. What do we need all this for? The Torah says Rashi should have begun with the first commandment halfway through the book of Exodus. The reason that the Torah began with the narratives of the first book and a half of Genesis and Exodus is because the time will come in the future when the nations of the world when the Jewish people will dominate the land of Israel, and the nations of the world will accuse Israel of having stolen the land from them. And the only answer that the Jewish people will be able to give as to why they are not stealing the land, why they're not colonialists, is because God, who created heaven and earth in the beginning of creation, is the one that created Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he promised to them the land of Israel, and he gave it to the Jewish people. It is the creator of the universe who gave us the land. We couldn't possibly be colonialists. I said this to the boy, and I said, listen, when did that happen in the history of the world? When did it happen in the history of the world that the Jewish people living in the land of Israel are going to be accused of stealing the land? It only happened now, like certainly since 1967, right, after the Six-Day War, but most acutely after October 7th in the past 2 years. This is why the Torah was written. The whole Torah was written, so that we would have the kahuns, the guts, to stand up to the world and say, no, we're not thieves. No, we're not colonialists. We couldn't possibly occupy our own house. We couldn't possibly be invaders in our own house. In fact, the word Palestinian in Hebrew comes from the word polesh, which means invader. They are invaders. The word Palestinian is an invader. And if you don't believe me, I'll prove it to you. You can't even say the word Palestinian in Arabic because there's no letter P in Arabic. It's a letter B. So if they think that they're Palestinians, indigenous natives, they couldn't possibly be. They don't even have that letter in the alphabet. They couldn't possibly be indigenous natives. This is our homeland, and it's up to us to exhibit the courage of our convictions, to believe in ourselves, to say the Torah and God is who gave us this promised land. But as long as we're embarrassed of Torah, as long as we're cut off from Torah, our prospects of survival are dismal, bordering on the miraculous. It's only when we're able to have the courage of our convictions to turn to the world and to say without fear, we are the heirs of the promised land. No other country in the world is called the promised land. Why is it called the promised land? Because it was promised by God to me. That's why it's the promised land. It's to call Jews colonialists is to reject the Bible. For Jews to play along with that idiotic argument is for Jews to turn their backs on the Bible. We cannot fall into that trap. We cannot fall into that ambush. And I said to this boy in the yeshiva in Chicago, I said to him, the Torah was written for our generation and for the past 2 years. And therefore, when the Torah says that your Torah study is going to bring peace to the security to the people of Israel, you better believe it. And let me tell you, he totally accepted the argument. It was very beautiful, Fabrayan. But the message to us is very, very clear, is that we need to be like trees. The spirituality of trees is such that they're constantly kissing the source. As you mentioned in the poem, they're constantly connected to their source. A Jew is always connected to Hashem through the study of Torah. And this is the reason why we learn Chayenu, by the way. The Chayenu is the daily Torah study of the Chumash and the Tehillim and the Tanya. And if you don't have it yet, you should subscribe to Chayenu. Go to CHAYENU.org. That's CHAYENU.org and subscribe. Have it delivered to your house. I think they'll send you the first 7 weeks free. And what you do is you learn the Chumash in English and the Tanya in English, and you read the Tehillim for the day. And what you're doing is, it's not just because you're adding wisdom to your life. It's because you're connecting. It's like taking your cell phone and plugging it into the wall. Why are you plugging your cell phone into the wall? Because you're learning something new? No, because you need energy. That's why we're compared to the trees. Look at that beautiful tree. It rises above from the earth, but beneath the ground, he's always connected. Right? So to a Jew, you might be a businessman, you might be an entrepreneur, you might be an innovator, you might be a Democrat or a Republican, you might be a politician, you might be a tourist, you might be whatever the heck you are. You can rise above the earth, but below the surface, you're always connected. It's a living, active connection. It's amazing. And that is the spirituality of trees.
Rabbi,
lots of comments coming in. I'm going to address them in a moment. What?
Rabbi, is the discussion on the spirituality of the trees. Is that the reason there are so many programs to plant trees in Israel?
No, sorry about that. I just want to say that there's a whole charity which is about planting trees in Israel. I have to tell you, I don't understand the charity. I have to tell you, I don't understand. Why is it that planting a tree is a charitable act? Why that's even 501c3 tax deductible? I don't even understand.
Well, look at the source. I mean, originally, the land was all desert. So the idea was to make it blue.
Okay, so
And that was a way to provide funds to get trees into place.
okay, fine. So now, if the purpose of the planting of the tree is to settle the land, like as a nationalistic endeavor, nothing too exciting. Is it an act of spirituality that they're planting the trees? I would have a hard time believing that. I don't think so. In other words, I just want to put it this way. Not everything that has a charitable tax deduction associated with it is indeed a mitzvah, okay? And even if it's in Hebrew letters, okay? Because not every charity is the same, right? And there are charities that masquerade as Jewish charities and masquerade as pro-Israel charities when really they're pro-Hamas, really they're pro-Palestinian, really they're funding Hamas. I mean, you really need to know what you're doing. In this case, the trees, of course, I think at best it's benign. At best it's benign.
On our first trip to Israel, we took our girls to an area where they were planting trees. And the girls were very excited because they got these little tiny trees and they put them in the ground and they covered them with dirt and then they watered them and they said a prayer. They got a certificate. And then as we were leaving, I see they were pulling out.
Oh my gosh, let's got the tree for the next group. Oh my God. Look, Rob, I just want to conclude. Chuck, I want to conclude by saying this. That, when somebody says, oh, look how Jewish I am. I planted a tree. I've got a certificate on the wall. If your Jewish identity is manifesting in planting trees, you need to see a rabbi fast, okay? Because that's not our Jewish identity. It's not nationalism. Yes, we have a country and it's beautiful, but that's not the be-all and end-all of our spirituality. Right? Our spirituality is godly, it's meaningful, it's holy, it's relationships, it's marriage, it's parenting, it's connection, it's meditation. That's spirituality. But to reduce your spirituality to planting a tree, I think is a little lacking. Let's just take a look at some of these comments coming in here. I was trying to just love this rabbi. Thank you, Dusty. Beautiful heart right there. I love trees. Okay. No, I'm a Christian. All Christian people who forsake the Jews forsake themselves. Oh, very nice. I can't pronounce your name, sir, but it looks very long. I'm a Christian. All Christian people who forsake the Jewish people forsake themselves. That's right, because we know what it says in the Bible. The Christians believe in the Bible. In the Bible, it says that God has given the land of Israel to the Jewish people, right? So any Christian that doesn't believe in that is forsaking himself. Shalom, brother from India. Please pray for my two sons and daughter, good education and good health. Okay. Do you know some Christians think they are Jews and better than Jews? Okay, I'll laugh at them. I'm an independent Torah scholar, meaning I've not been indoctrinated into false teachings. I've learned directly from Hashem's presence through the partaking of His presence. Okay, all right. So, this guy's from Norway. Very nice. Not in a monastery. Very nice. This guy's giving me a recipe. Very nice. Okay. Torah is full. Okay. Michael. Roman gypsy. Ooh, interesting. Okay. Okay, let's see if there's anything noteworthy here. Love this rabbi's passion and love for Torah and Hashem. Precious. Thank you, Dusty. I'm not a Jew, but I will never let history repeat itself. Thank you. Torah is the deed of the land, says Linda. Well said. Okay, we're almost done these comments. Rabbi, you need moderators on this live stream. I love your work, and I'm leaving this chat. Ooh, why? Why do we need moderators? Why do we need moderators? Okay. Greetings from New Mexico. Thank you for sharing these teachings. Shalom. All right, folks. Beautiful. Great worldwide wisdom. Great being connected. Be like a tree. Stay connected.